In today's video, I'm going to be answering one of the most common questions in digital marketing, which is what should my budget be for running ads and can I afford it? We'll use a simple calculator to help you determine how much should you spend on running ads to get the best results possible and to just get an overall idea on what KPIs to optimize for.
So let me show you how this actually works. Before I jump into it, super important that this is for B2B lead gen. So this is for businesses that have a longer sales process, meaning that their advertising is optimized and focused on generating quality leads, where those leads are nurtured in a funnel and a sales process rather than like a direct purchase on the website. Now, don't worry, I'm gonna make a whole separate video with the same exact topic for ecom and any other direct purchase related business, but you can find the link to that in the description below. So go ahead and check that out if that refers to you. Now, for all of you who stayed because you're advertising for B2B lead gen, this is the calculator. And over here, we are going to be entering your data, all right? So left-hand side is the ad spend budget. This is the first number that you're gonna be entering. And this is basically what is the budget that you have allocated for your ads over 90 days. So you have $15,000 here for this example. That means about $5,000 per month being spent on ads over 90 days. You can obviously put more. For example, you can put like $25,000 or for example, $50,000, and the numbers will change accordingly. Of course, the number of leads will go up, the number of calls will go up, the number of calls that actually show up will go up, and then you can change that right here. Now, these two numbers will manipulate everything else. Anything else over here, just make sure do not touch that, as these are simply for the calculation. All you're going to do is input your offer price and your ad spend budget over 90 days. If you have an offer, let's say $2,000, you would put that right here, and then the rest would change for you as well. Okay, so I'm gonna put this back to 5,000. And the next thing in the budget calculator that I wanna explain is that it calculates with these industry KPIs. We have the best case, average case, and then worst case scenario. Now again, please don't touch any of these numbers here. They're already formulated for you, but I just want to give you the KPIs so that you can see what the best case, average case, and then worst case would be across the board in the industry, selling high-ticket coaching courses, services, masterminds, agencies, etc. So the cost per lead will range from $20 to $50 in today's marketplace. Your cost per booked call is going to be around $200 to $400 to go. Now, if you're doing B2B, for example, you're a manufacturer or selling to coaches, course creators, agency owners, or any other type of B2B companies, this can be as high as 400 to 500 plus, depending on your audience, of course, especially when it's a marketing qualified lead, like someone that actually not only books a call with you, but is qualified, meaning that they make enough money to actually work with you. So that can be a lot higher, right? So you just need to be aware of that, because I just want to give you super realistic expectations here. And then show up rate is anywhere from 60 to 80%. So in B2B, it could be, 60 to 80%, but B2C can be as low as 50%, sometimes even 40%. And that's like worst case scenario. So obviously this is the range of what you want to aim for. Now, close rate across the board in the industry as a KPI should be about 15% to 40%. 15 is like worst case scenario. Out of like 10 people who talk to you, you're closing 1. That's like worst case scenario. Best case, you're closing 4 out of 10, right? And that's considered really good. And you should increase your prices immediately, because you just have so much demand at that point that you should be increasing your prices. So that's the industry KPIs. And so I've given you 3 case scenarios here: best case, average case, and worst case. So best case scenario, you're getting a cost per lead of $20. You're getting a cost per booked call of $250. You're getting a show up rate of 70%. Like 7 out of 10 people are showing up when they book a call. This is super important. And then you're closing 3 out of those 10 people. And that's like best case scenario. That's really good. Now, if you're already in this bracket, good for you, my friend, because bear in mind, brands take weeks or even months to dial in their funnel to get to this point. On the other hand, the average case scenario usually has a cost per lead of around $30. So cost per book call would be $300 in this case. Your show up rate is about 60%, which is again industry standard, like across the board on average. And then the close rate is about 20%, meaning that you're closing 2 out of 10 people you talk to that like actually show up to the call. And then lastly, worst case scenario would be $40 cost per lead, $400 cost per call, and then 50% show up rate, meaning 5 out of 10 people are actually showing up to the calls that they book. And then 10% of those people are actually being closed, meaning that you're closing 1 out of 10, which is like worst case scenario. That's worst case scenario. So here's what this would look like to be. If you have a budget of $15,000 or the 3 months over 90 days, which is $5K per month, and you're selling an offer of, let's say, $5,000, that means best case, you can realistically expect about 750 leads, 60 booked calls, 42 short calls, meaning live calls that you actually talk to people, 13 sales, and 65K in generated revenue, which is a return on ad spend of 4.3x. That's really, really good. That's super good. Most businesses in today's marketplace really can't consistently keep above a 4x return on ad spend. And I've seen this many, many times because again, here's a lot of factors at play. It's a lot of these things as well. It's not just the ads. It's usually the leadership of the team, the management of the sales team, or even just like leading yourself, managing your emotions, being able to close, being able to show up to, with high energy, being able to do all those things. It's like a system. So there's a lot of factors that you can obviously manipulate that affect this end result right here. But best case, given the math here, with a $15,000 budget, $5,000 per month and an offer of about $5,000, best case scenario, you can expect about a 4x return on ad spend. Again, that's really, really good. Now, in average case, you can expect about 500 leads, about 50 booked calls, 30 calls that actually show up, and then 6 sales and about $30,000 in revenue generated. It's a 2x return on ad spend this time, meaning you spent $15K on ads and you made back $30K. Still really, really good, okay? The 2x return on ad spend is still really good. Why? Because you spent $15,000 and you made back $30,000, and that's about 15K in profit. Now, of course, if you deduct overheads and things like that, maybe it's more like a 1.5x return on ad spend, but you're still making about $10,000 in pure profit, and you're acquiring customers at a profit that can actually be upsold into back-end offers like a mastermind or like a service that's more long-term, and you can increase your lifetime value because you're actually profitable on the front end so that you can go ahead and spend more and make more money on the back end as well. So a 2x return on ad spend is still really, really good. Just bear in mind. Trust me, most businesses would love a 2x return on ad spend, especially at the corporate level, because if they're profitable, making double their money back on their ad spend, spending 15 grand, making 30 grand back, they're going to spend a fuck ton of money simply because they can make a lot more money on the back end because they're acquiring customers at a profit. Now, worst case scenario, you spend 15 grand over 90 days and you get only 375 leads, you get about 38 booked calls, and out of those 38 calls, only 19 people show up at the show rate of 15%. Again, your number of sales is only 2. And that means that you only make $10,000 back, so your return on ad spend is less than 1x. It's a 0.65x return on ad spend. You've spent $15,000 and you've made back $10,000. Now, keep in mind, even if you did this in the first month of running ads, that's still pretty good. You spend about 15K and you made back 10,000. Now, that's obviously not going to be the best, but if it was month 1, like it was the results of month 1, you spent 15K and you made back $10,000 month 1, that's really good because it means that you have something to work from. Like, it means that you can now scientifically look at the data and make optimizations and new iterations. Is it the landing page that you need to improve? Is it the cost per booked call? Is it the actual sales process? You can start to work the system and actually move to the average case and then of course to the best case. So this gives you a general idea of what you should expect. Now, this should also help you become aware of exactly how much you need to spend to be able to make the money you want, because as you can see here, if you only spend $15,000 over 90 days, you can realistically expect to make about $65,000, which is really, really good. But if you're expecting to make 100 grand a month, well, obviously, or not month, but like in general from that 15K you spent, obviously you're going to have to change this number to $25,000. Like, you're spending $25,000 in that sense to be able to make 100 grand back. Then you can realistically expect to make 100 grand given that everything in your systems optimize enough where you're getting $20 cost per leads, $250 cost per calls, and a 70% show up rate and a 30% close rate, which is really, really, really hard to do, especially right off the gate, because especially if you're just starting from scratch, meaning you're a total beginner, you don't really have a validated offer yet. You haven't really ran a book call funnel before using a VSL, or you really don't have your settles or closers in place, or maybe you haven't even trained yourself to take calls from people that don't know you or like you or trust you just yet. That's why it's going to take time to optimize the system to be able to get to that best case scenario, which is, most often businesses can consistently hit a 4x return on ad spend to cold traffic. And that's why we call it best case scenario. And if you're expecting to only spend, well, let's say like $10,000 over 90 days and you sell a $4,000 offer, well, you can only expect to realistically get about average case scenario, 333 leads, maybe 33 calls, 20 showed up calls, and then 4 sales from that 20 showed up calls, making 16 grand, which is still really good. But I just want to point this out because you have to have realistic expectations here. Given your actual budget, obviously the more you spend, the faster you acquire data and the faster you can make optimizations to improve your system. And the more you improve the system, the closer you can get to an average case or even like a best case scenario by generally optimizing your system, all right? Improving your landing page, improving your ads, improving your sales process, improving your show rates, improving your email marketing sequences, your nurturing sequences, your content, and everything else along those lines to actually get people to where they're buying more from you and consistently from you. All that to say, this is how it works. I hope this all makes sense now. If it's not understandable, shoot a comment or join my free school community and my team will answer all your questions. Link in the description below. But I will say this as well. If you already have a sales team, maybe you're running like Facebook ads and you want to add YouTube ads as a second source traffic because you need to fill your sales team's calendar with more calls, well, we need to reverse engineer the math here. Let's say you have a new closer being ramped up and he needs like a full calendar in the next 30 days. Okay, let's just take this as an example scenario. Well, full calendar is realistically about 4 or 5 calls per day. Like, let's look at best case scenario again. If you look at this and you're only spending $12,000 over the 90 days, that's $4,000 per month. Well, if you look at this 90 divided by 48, best case scenario, that's maybe 1 to 2 calls per day. So that's not going to be enough to fill their calendar. Now, if you're running ads for yourself and let's say you're the full-time salesperson, well, if you only have a budget of $12,000, again, you can expect to get maybe 1 to 2 calls per day, best case. So if you need more calls, especially showed up calls, you're going to need a bigger budget for ad spend and you have to spend a little bit more. So let's say $20,000, okay? Now you actually have 56 showed calls over 90 days. And that's how you can actually reverse engineer the math to figure out how much you need to spend realistically to pack your closest calendar or your calendar with showed calls that they can actually speak to you and eventually close in terms of sales.
So I hope this video was helpful for you. Go ahead and play around with these numbers. And also feel free to look around in the channel for more useful lead gen and e-com paid ads tips. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Cheers.